Thank you for waiting patiently. We will start, and hopefully those who were turned away from the door will find their way in again and will come back. We have some technical issue, but welcome to the role of religious leader in responding to crisis in the Arab region. This is one of the focus geographical area that the IF20 is hosting, among other sessions, and the session is sponsored by KAICIID, the International Center for Interreligious Intercultural Dialogue in Vienna. And we're delighted and honored to have all of you here. Again, warm welcome to all of you who came here. The focus of the session is really about the various types of crises, health, security, education, governance, any type of crisis situation in this region. And we were hoping to look at different responses from different agencies, religious agencies, as well as government agencies who also collaborate with religious institution. Due to the various COVID-related issue and travel from the region, we had number of cancellations in terms of speaker. The first one is really Ambassador, His Excellency Ambassador Bisquella Ferrari, who actually had a fever in the airport in Cairo and had to be quarantined in Cairo and couldn't leave. The Mufti of Egypt as well declined in the last day or two days ago. So we've had a number of those declination in the last minute. But thank God we have a number of speakers who already been agreed upon and also invited before, and we look forward for their input as well as rich interaction and responses from them. But first of all, allow me to invite His Excellency Faisal Muaammar, the Secretary General of KAICIID, for a brief introductory remark and welcoming. Your Excellency.
Assalamu alaikum. I would like to greet all of you and thank you for accepting our invitation and come to Bologna to attend with us this session and also to attend this very, very important gathering. As you know, KAICIID was a leader in leading the last meeting in Saudi Arabia. Unfortunately, we couldn't do it physical, it was virtual. But you know, it's more than 2,500 people. We did the regional meetings, we did, the final meeting. It was difficult. COVID-19 taught us very, very tough lessons. You know, it is really not easy to do or work or meet or contact during this difficult time. And if it's difficult for the whole world, it's more difficult in the Arab world, where communication sometimes is not easy. And we are used to gathering in our worship places where people really enjoy meeting with each other and, you know, hugging each other and, you know, socializing with each other. And this is really the best of our life, where our religious leaders are playing very, very important role. So KAICIID, when we started 2005, I remember that very well, and I was part of the planning of the creation of KAICIID, and then I took over in 2008 to establish KAICIID in Vienna. One of the major goals is to bring religion and religious leaders and religious institutions to support policymakers. It was not an easy journey. When we spoke to our friends in the Western society, especially some foreign diplomat and some foreign ministries, you know, sometimes I will say, they say to me, please, let's see you outside in a hidden place, nobody can see us. We don't want to talk about religion. Religion is, why they are saying that? Because they think religion is part of the problem or it's a problem. It's not part of the solution. And this is why we thought, and if you think about it, I said it in my speech yesterday, there is no way to make good life without the good relation between religious leaders, religious institutions, and policymakers. And what we want to do, especially in the Arab world, we want religious leaders to support policymakers, not to be against them, or to do whatever crazy things, the misuse of religion. Sometimes I don't want to go through difficult things, but you know, this is what's happening, and everybody knows what's going on when you play with religion or misuse religion. So besides creating KAICIID, we thought where to go. We are coming from the announcement coming from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, in the two holy city of Mecca, in the biggest gathering of the world, where we have 500 religious leaders from every sect of Islam. They came to Mecca and they announced the first declaration, I will say the first declaration after Instratata. It is also coming from the declaration of Mecca, of Wathiqat al-Madina, the declaration of Medina. This is what we are doing. We are not creating something new. So in Mecca, we made the first call. It was led by King Abdullah, rahimahullah. And then we continue the journey. We try to convince the whole world that religion can be positive, can be part of the solution, can be power for good things. And if you want to know how religion could be more important than military solution or political solution, think of what's happening in Afghanistan. It's an excellent example of the failure for military solution. Anyway, we created the Arab platform, and thanks to our team led by Professor Mohammed Abu-Nimer and Dr. Wasim, and the excellent team in our center, we created the Arab platform, and we went on with your support. We've been working for a couple of years. We did a lot of fantastic things. We are gathering today to tell you how religious leaders can contribute of solving some of the issues we are facing in the Arab world. And we can do a lot when we join hands, and can be possible. KAICIID, the only IGO in the field of interreligious dialogue, created one, what you call it, pathway to connect religious leaders with policymakers. This is really, I will say, branded by KAICIID, led by KAICIID, and nobody had done it before KAICIID. So we are proud of what we are doing. But we cannot do it without you. Anyway, we've been struggling the last 9 years between religion and politics. And thank God we made it. We made it because we have an excellent brains, and we have the support of our Council of Party led by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and we have the support of the Kingdom of Spain, the Republic of Austria, the Holy See as a founding observer. We have also an excellent religious leaders in our board, Muslim, Christian, Jewish, Buddhist, Hindus. We are proud working with them. And then we have all these branches of the Arab platform and the African platform and the Asian platform. And also we are proud to announce that so far we graduated hundreds, I would say, of more than 500 fellows from our program. So we have now 500 ambassadors all over the world, and we have some youth are going to be tomorrow with us. And I talked yesterday, I don't want to say anything, but we were the leader of doing the best G20 event so far. We did it last year. And I hope this year also with the Italian, although I was not really a little bit happy about not including a Muslim religious leaders yesterday in the opening, and I hope that can be recovered soon. I would like to thank all of you, and I don't want to, I know Dr. Abu-Nimer now is getting upset. He will use his red card against me. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for the welcoming remark, as well as the briefing of KAICIID and its effort in linking policymakers and religious leaders for the last 9 years. Thank you. As I mentioned, we've had the Mufti and also the Patriarch, but both of them could not leave the region for various reasons. But we were lucky to have a video message from His Holiness Aram Keshishian, the Patriarch of the Catholic seat of the great house of Cilicia from Lebanon. And we will play it for a few minutes and then we'll resume our program.
Dear friends, more than at any other time, the world, which is marked by increasing tensions, polarizations, and crises of diverse nature and scope, is in dire need of healing. In fact, healing is achieved through dialogue, mutual understanding and acceptance, and common commitment to ethical values and human rights. Religion may play a pivotal role in building ethically healthy, socio-economically equitable, and ecologically sustainable societies. In the Arab region, where I come from, the three monotheistic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, with their rich potentials, experiences, and insights, can play a major role for at least three main reasons. First, they share common roots, traditions, and values. Second, as an integral part of their societies, they embrace in their life and witness all the spheres and dimensions of their communities. And third, their long history of coexistence, often marked by tensions and estrangement, calls them to reaffirm their faithfulness to their common values and vocation. I am aware that such trilateral collaboration and engagement could be perceived as unrealistic in view of the prevailing tension in the region. However, I do believe that these religions can act as a platform of creative interaction. In this perspective, and within the perimeter of this panel, I would like to share with you a few observations for further reflection and discussion. First, the representatives of monotheistic religions often meet and interact in different contexts and occasions on a global level. Why should they not meet in the Middle East around a depoliticized agenda by focusing on their role as justice promoters and confidence builders? Second, these discussions may help them to deepen their common values and seek how those values are relevant and can be articulated in the context of new realities. Such informal encounters may also support the global efforts of combating violent extremism, intolerance, and new expressions of racism. Third, regarding crises facing societies, the response of these religions, in my judgment, should be proactive. They must avoid identifying themselves with reactive policies as well as nationalistic ideologies that may jeopardize their specific identity and hamper the efficacy of their prophetic vocation. Fourth, the monotheistic religions, while preserving the integrity of their identity and teachings, are called to engage in close partnership with the other institutions of civil society in addressing common issues impacting the life of societies. And finally, in respect to policymakers, the role of any religion in any place and under all circumstances should be prophetic, challenging, and critical on the basis of ethical values. It should call for transparency and accountability, and for credible and reliable governance. In these ways, religions, their leaders and institutions may significantly contribute towards the efforts aimed at the restoration of peace with justice and peaceful cohabitation among nations, religions, and cultures in the Middle East.
Thank you. Religious platform are a space for creativity. Second, he invites meetings not only in the Northern Hemisphere, but also to go to the South, including the Middle East. And he says why globally it's always in the North. And third one, he encouraged the role of the prophetic voice based on ethical values as the base for any reaction to crisis. That's what the Patriarch suggested for us. We've heard from a religious leader. Now I think we can move to our first policymaker. And today we're honored to have our dear partner and also one of the really initial partner we work with in the region, His Excellency Minister Pshtiwan Sadeq Abdullah, the Minister of Religious Affairs in Kurdistan, Iraq. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم صدق الله العظيم. Good afternoon, Excellencies, distinguished guests. It's a great pleasure to be present and speak at this important event. First of all, I would like to thank the Secretary General, His Excellency Faisal bin Muaammar. Also thank KAICIID for organizing this event and invite me to speak. As you are aware, the Middle East is recognized as a home for many religious traditions, including the Abrahamic faith, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, as well as for non-Abrahamic faiths such as Zoroastrian and the Baha'yan faith. Therefore, the region has a long history of being a religiously diverse society. Religious and faith communities occupy unique and specific roles and functions in society. Thus, religion as a social factor has a strong impact on many individual lives and their communities, taking lessons from the region, particularly since 2000. Religion needs to be taken seriously as a source for both good and bad. However, in the absence of the rule of law, such as in post-conflict situations, the risk of manipulating the role of religion as the main source of escalating violence increases. This has been noticed to several countries in the region. Societies which experience an extended violent environment are more likely to influence their decision-making in daily life. In this regard, often people are more inclined to use violence as a method to resolve problems or conflicts. In the past, violence was considered one of the most desirable ways to pursue changes in Middle East countries. The situation in Iraq and other places such as Syria, Yemen are some examples where both people and governments use violence as a means to achieve their political, religious, and ethnic ends. From our experience in the region, we have realized that the role of religious leaders, faith-based institutions, and organizations are vital in dictating people and the authorities to make changes without resorting to the use of violence. Many international reports recognize Iraq Kurdistan region as a safe haven for different religious and ethnic groups who were forcibly internally displaced, despite the fact that the Iraqi Kurdistan region has a rich historical background of coexistence. The government and the institution also played a key role in enhancing this important matter. The support of religious leaders who called for religious coexistence and promoting diversity in the region was significant in this process. The ministry also encouraged and involved civil society organizations to support this initiative. We could say that this was a successful case and outlines that when the actors collaborate in an initiative, the impact would be significant. I would also like to emphasize that the role of religious leaders is vital in the region. For example, religious leaders can speak out as a voice for peace and undermine appeals to violence based on religion, especially within their own tradition. The role in which religious leaders can speak up on behalf of those suffering to both government and society. The importance of building relationships across communities that show mutual respect while still recognize there may be theological difference. Promoting constructive dialogue as an effective method and productive way to pursue changes in society. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for the several points in which you pointed out to the role of the Kurdistan region in providing safe haven to many of the religious groups, as well from minority and from majority in Iraq, from all the religious component in Iraq, to which extent that the region has become indeed safe haven. And you pointed out that religious leaders, in addition to civil society, were supported by specific and concrete government policy as well, and encourage the dialogue as well, the work of dialogue. Allow me to invite the remaining panelists with us, Dr. Abdullah Al-Humaid, تفضل يا دكتور, and Dr. Naila Tabara, and Dr. Hind Qabawat, and His Eminence Dr. Sayyid Jawad Al-Khoei. تفضلوا. So we've heard from one governmental, one policy maker, and now we'll hear from Dr. Abdullah Al-Humaid, who's the Secretary General of the National Committee for Interfaith and Intercultural Dialogue in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And Dr. Abdullah Al-Humaid will give us a macro view as somebody who interacts with the policymakers in the kingdom, who work with a number of agencies on a policy level, how to connect religion, dialogue with policy as well. Doctor.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Professor Mohammed. Let me start by thanking KAICIID and His Excellency, the Secretary General, for inviting me. I am privileged and honored to be with you. And also I would like to thank the Italian host of the G20 Interfaith Forum. I will focus in my presentation on the policy aspect of the interaction between religious leaders and policymakers, because I come from a public policy background. I will address two major points. The first one is the Arab government's response to the crisis of COVID-19, and then I will address the reaction of religious leaders and institutions in the region to such actions. But before I start, I'd like to make a few introductory remarks. It's about my observations that I will present here regarding the reaction of religious leaders towards the government actions. It's really hard, if it's not misleading, to generalize about the Arab world. And the reason for that is that the Arab region has become increasingly diverse in terms of methods of governance, state capacity, and availability of resources, in addition to the pre-existing diversity in terms of ethnicity, sectarianism, and religious affiliations. Two issues are more relevant to my talk today, which are the state capacity and the relationship between religious leaders and institutions to the state. With regard to the state capacity, there is a great deal of diversity that may impact the relationship between governments and religious institutions or religious leaders as well. We have 3 failed states in the region, and I assume we have at least another 3 fragile or weak states. That would make the comparison and the generalizations rather hard. Even among the normally functioning states, there are major differences that make generalizing about the Arab world more difficult. We have countries like Jordan, Tunisia, Morocco, with limited resources to deal with COVID-19 And then on the other hand, we have a country like Saudi Arabia, which has a very sophisticated and highly developed health system to deal with infectious diseases during the Hajj season. Saudi Arabia has a system, I think, since the late 1990s to deal with situations similar to what we have because of the pilgrimage in Mecca. So that also make it difficult to generalize. And finally, in regard to the relationship between religious leaders and the state, there are noticeable differences among the Arab countries in terms of the autonomy that religious institutions and leaders enjoy from the state, which depends on each country's sectarian makeup and history. Taking those considerations into account, the following observations are very high level and tentative observations on the interaction between the policymakers and the religious leaders in the Arab region. Now, with regard to the response of the Arab governments to COVID-19, we didn't see any difference in their response. They have taken very drastic measures in varying degree, of course, to mitigate the spread of COVID-19. And some of the noticeable examples, national or complete or partial lockdown, restricting air travel, closing schools and universities, banning large gathering, mandating mask wearing. Now, when it comes to religious practices, we have seen the suspension of the Hajj and Umrah which was the most maybe dramatic measure that was taken by the Saudi government in the second half of 2020 and continued until 21 with less restrictions this year. Suspension of Friday prayers, closing of mosques and churches, mandating mosque and church goers to maintain safe distance inside while they are worshiping, limiting the number of people attending funerals. Of course, these measures were implemented in varying degrees in different times in each Arab countries. Now, the question is, how did the religious leaders in the Arab world responded to the state actions to mitigate COVID-19? Well, the answer is, well, it depends. It depends on the position of the religious leader or institution within the society. In this respect, there are two categories of religious leaders or institutions in the Arab world. First category is a state-sponsored, which include ulama, imams of mosque and preachers. They are employed by the state, financed by the state, and directed by national governments. And then we have the second category, which is the non-official religious leaders or institutions which are legally separate from the government and financially independent. Now, there is another factor that has to be taken into account before assessing the reaction of the religious leaders, and that's the question of priorities. For policymakers, the priority was basically to protect the public health system by preventing the spread of the coronavirus through adopting medical and public health measures. For religious leaders, the priority is basically the continuity of religious services through the opening of the places of worship. Well, based on the available information, and this is a very general assessment, the response of religious leaders in the Arab countries to the government's measures to deal with COVID-19, one could conclude that those leaders have shown a great deal of moral responsibility and provided national governments in the region with the necessary support needed for the successful implementation of the public health measures to deal with COVID-19. Now, in terms of forms of support, well, there are a variety of support that religious leaders have provided national governments, but two forms of support stand out. The first one is that the religious leaders ask their followers to comply with the public health measures. The second one is justifying the state action regarding the suspension of religious activities and the closure of places of worship by appealing to either religious texts or historical example from the past. Example, we have the senior ulama of Al-Azhar in Egypt issued a very strong statement supporting the public health measures taken by the government and stated clearly that that compliance with those measures is a religious duty of every individual living in the country. In Saudi Arabia, the senior ulama, through its general secretariat, issued a very strong public statement endorsing the government's actions on the basis of serving the interest of the whole of the good for the society. And also we have the leadership of the Coptic Church in Egypt closed the main cathedral and other churches all over the country in response to the government's request. Of course, there have been some exceptions to these tendencies. There were instances of defiance against the state policies by some religious leaders, particularly in the area of closing mosques and churches or visiting shrines in some Arab countries. Those aspects of defiance were more common among non-official religious leaders than religious leaders affiliated with the state. It must be emphasized, however, that such resistance to the public health measures were related to the design of the public policy rather than the principle of the public policy itself. Those religious leaders thought that closing mosques or churches while allowing shopping malls to open was simply unfair. With regard to the actual role of religious leaders in the decision-making process related to mitigating COVID-19, the government supported faith-based organizations or leaders are already integrated in the state apparatus. However, it was really unclear if they were involved or consulted in the planning of the decision-making and the implementation of policies related to COVID-19 response. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Al-Khoei, always succinct and to the point. And if you did not get the 3 points, do not generalize on the Arab world because it's too diverse to put them all in one basket. The second point, there are 3 failed states and the 3 to be failed in the future, or if you projected, they're weak. And the third point is that the relationship between state and religion, one of the core aspects, formal and informal. The Mufti office is formal. The one who give the Friday sermon on the TV on Saturday or Sunday is the informal. And he says that the formal endorsed the policies and the informal were more descending or they objected, but not to the public health issue. They objected to the malls versus the mosque or the churches, but nevertheless, none of them were involved in the policymaker or even consulted. I hope I did fair to the summary here. Dr. Naila Tabara is the director. Let me just get her exact title. President, not director, of Adyan Foundation, a colleague and an active peacemaker in the region. Doctor, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Professor Mohammed, and good evening, everyone. And I would like to first thank KAICIID for inviting me to be here with you. I will try to be as succinct as possible. First, about the title of our session. The title talks about religious leaders. I would like to broaden this more. I would like to talk about religious leaders and influencers. Today, a lot of people are also influencers. They are shaping the religiosity of our people. They mostly are influencers on social media. So maybe we should widen our work when we are working not only with official institutions and religious leaders, but also with influentials. This allows us to take in everyone and also allows us to take in more women. Because, I mean, even in Arabic, the term itself for religious leader excludes women. Rajul Din. Whereas we have now, for example, in Lebanon, where I come from, we have 3 women religious leaders in the Protestant church. So, so we need to widen so that it becomes more acceptable that we have also women religious leaders. One of them, a friend of mine, says that sometimes when she's wearing her clergyman, you know, her dress, people think that she is mocking religious leaders. So this is so much not part of our culture that we need to integrate it and work on it. So first, religious leaders and influencers. Second, we know how much religious institutions and religious leaders do work in times of crisis. We've seen in the COVID, we see in other crises. Yet, I think we can all work together and agree together that we can help also the work of those religious leaders and influencers and institutions. I think that 2 things are very important. First, providing tools and training on issues such as, for example, religious social responsibility. Our responsibility as religions, not only to our flock, to the people who belong to our group, but also to everyone, because these are the values of all our religions. Other issues concerning citizenship, concerning public life, because most of the time also religious leaders do not get that sort of formation. They take a training in their in the religion and the religious subjects, but not in the subjects where they are asked to talk about. In their sermons and their presence with people, they are asked to talk about social and political issues. So they would need to get their concepts right. So sort of training in that, and also, of course, on interreligious literacy, to know more about other religions and what they believe, to correct their knowledge about that, because we don't get that information. So that and networks joining together religious leaders and influencers from different faiths so that they become more used to working together. In this regard, I would like to say how for the past years I've been seeing excellent results of all the fellowship programs that have been done by KAICIID. We've seen people who from those trainings and from those networks not only know more, have broken the walls of fear from each other, but who are actually eager to work with each other, eager to do something together. The same also, we work the same in Adyan Foundation, to have networks also joining men and women of faith from different backgrounds. And we can see also the same happening with in Religions for Peace and other organizations working to bring people together so that in times of crisis, they can work together. I think a fourth dimension that we need to focus on, all of us, is more intercommunal solidarity. Especially when there is marginalization or persecution of one group. Generally, this leaves the same group only fighting for the rights of their own people. We've seen it, all of us, we did not stand really well with the Yazidis. And until today, there are 3,000 Yazidis that are still missing, and we should all, in the name of all our religions, stand with them and look for the missing people. We need more solidarity with each other, and not each time a group is persecuted or marginalized, leave them to defend themselves, so that we always help each other. Now, on the other hand, what do we expect from the political scene? Because I think here we are in the preparation of the G20 to give some recommendations and what we expect from the political scene. First, not to use religion, from the political scene, not to use religion for political agendas. We see that everywhere. So not to use the religious authorities and also sometimes the good faith of religious leaders for political agendas. The second thing, which I think is more important, is not to cover up political issues or not to cover up human rights issues with interreligious folklore. We see this a lot, for example, when they show us examples of Jewish, Christian, and Muslim together in Palestine, to cover up that there is a human rights issue that needs to be faced. This is not an interreligious issue, this is a human rights issue that needs to be addressed. So just to be, those are the two things that I want to say for as a recommendation. And a third one, that in principle, both religions and politics are made to serve people. Their aim is to be in service and not to be hegemonic. So we need to ask ourselves always, how can we be less hegemonic and more for the service of people? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Naila. And she expanded between the informal and the formal institution and injected influencer, which is a term we use for lots of the social media and activists, both in religion and also policymaker. But also she made two concrete suggestions: the capacity building. For the religious leader to help, they need to build their capacity, and she called for building that capacity. And the second suggestion she made is about the fellowship as an example, but really the core one was about solidarity. Do not leave each other in a crisis. We need to stand. She gave the example of the Yazidis, and as you know, KAICIID in 2014 invited the Yazidis and gave them a stage in several occasions, but I think there is some more room to do there. And your two policy recommendations also were recognized. Sayyid Jawad Al-Khoei is, although coming from London, but he's from Iraq and Najaf, and he works as well there. For those of you who don't know, His Eminence Dr. Sayyid Jawad Al-Khoei, Secretary General Al-Khoei Institute, co-founder of the Iraqi Council for Interreligious Dialogue, KAICIID, and UNESCO Chair, Development of the Interreligious Dialogue Studies, University of Najaf. We're honored to have you. The floor is yours.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. سيداتي سادتي، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بداية أتقدم بجزيل الشكر للمنظمين الكرام ولكايسيد بشكل خاص ولإتاحة هذه الفرصة الكريمة، ولي الشرف أن أكون بينكم في هذه الندوة. إننا بدأنا الحوار في العراق منذ أكثر من 10 سنين كأفراد غرباء مبتعدين عن بعضنا الآخر، لا يعرف أحدنا الآخر، ولكن بعد جهود صادقة ومخلصة وثقة متبادلة أصبحنا اليوم مؤسسات ومنظمات، أصدقاء وشركاء، نعمل سوية لأهداف مشتركة وقيم إنسانية وأخلاقية واحدة. همنا أولاً وآخراً كرامة الإنسان. الحضور الكريم، استطعنا أن نحول السلبيات إلى إيجابيات ونقلب التحديات إلى فرص. إن الإرهاب والعنف قد أرهق العراقيين جميعاً، لكن من جهة أخرى قد زادت في وعيهم وإصرارهم ووحدت دعاة الحياة والاعتدال والوسطية. ومن هنا قد وقف جميع شرائح المجتمع العراقي بمختلف مكوناته وأعراقه وأديانه ومذاهبه بوجه الإرهاب. وكذلك لاحظنا كيف خرج مئات الآلاف من الشباب في مظاهرات سلمية بمختلف المحافظات العراقية مطالبين بحقوق المواطنة وبشعار منطقي بسيط: نريد وطن. سادتي وسيداتي، إن الحوار الحقيقي الذي له دلالات ومعنى ويقطف فيها الثمار حيث يكون في مناطق الصراع، إذ نرى نتيجة الجهود المتواصلة ومنها تتكون صداقات صادقة مع مختلف المكونات. قد تكون جهودنا المخلصة تساعد على ترميم وإصلاح ما تخربه السياسة والتطرف. نطمح أن تثمر جهودنا بجعل الدين عامل التقاء للمؤمنين لا عامل تفرقة وسبب بنشوء التطرف. علينا العمل بصورة جدية لمنع المتطرفين من اختطاف الدين وعدم جعل المصالح السياسية فوق مصالح الشعوب التي تحب العيش بسلام. نعم، لا أنكر أن هناك موانع كثيرة وصعاب شتى حتى يصل الأمر أحياناً إلى التخوين والتهديد بالقتل، ليس من الآخر فقط بل مع الأسف من بعض متطرفي مجتمعنا. لكن نحن مصرين بتواصل المسير وماضين بتحمل هذه المسؤولية حتى نصل إن شاء الله إلى الغاية القصوى والهدف الأسمى، ألا وهو تعزيز العدالة الاجتماعية وترسيخ الكرامة الإنسانية والمواطنة الصالحة. إن المؤسسة الدينية في النجف الأشرف كانت وما زالت تدعم كل هذه الجهود المباركة، لأننا نؤمن أن جميع العراقيين في قارب واحد، فما يصيب المكونات والأقليات من مكروه سينعكس لا محالة سلباً على الأكثرية. إن العدالة لا تتجزأ فهي للجميع. سأذكر لكم بعض النماذج العملية وباختصار. أولاً، زيارات متبادلة إلى دور العبادة والصلاة المشتركة في مختلف المحافظات، واللقاء بأتباع الأديان والمذاهب الأخرى بدءاً من أربيل والموصل ولالش والأنبار، وهم بادلون أيضاً الزيارة إلى النجف الأشرف. ثانياً، لقاءات دورية للقيادات الدينية لكل من السنة والشيعة والمسيحيين بمختلف طوائفهم والصابئ المندائية والإيزيدية، وتبادل الهموم والتحديات والحلول. ثالثاً، نظمنا ورش عمل للشباب والسيدات من مختلف الطوائف والانتماءات لتعزيز الهوية الوطنية. رابعاً، أنجزنا كراساً تعريفياً مختصراً للأديان والمذاهب في العراق، حيث كتب من قبل ممثليهم ويراد منه التعريف السليم والصحيح للشباب ولطلاب الجامعات وللجيل القادم. وأخيراً، كل هذه الجهود وغيرها تكللت بالزيارة التاريخية للحبر الأعظم البابا فرانسيس إلى العراق، والاجتماع الاستثنائي بالمرجع الأعلى الإمام السيد علي السيستاني، ونتمنى أن نرى قريباً إن شاء الله زيارة الشيخ الأزهر الإمام الدكتور أحمد الطيبي للعراق. شكراً لحسن الاستماع.
Thank you, Dr. Al-Khoei Jawad, for the, I guess you cannot speak about the Arab region, and this is unfortunately the expectation without talking about violent extremism. And Dr. Jawad Al-Khoei, for those of you who did not get the full translation, he said basically that the role of religious leader during the crisis in Iraq is to fight terrorism and to fight violent extremism. And the way to do that is by meeting each other insisting on meeting each other, on exchanges and ongoing meeting as well, basic education about faith and creating a lexicon or terminology, and also inviting the Pope Francis and also trying to also bring Al-Azhar and hopefully also more religious leaders from the other parts of the Muslim world as well. But I think one point to leave you with, he pointed out something very important, we usually forget. We push the religious leader to act, but he said sometimes that cost them their life. He said there are life-threatening messages against those who will work in violent extremism. And that's an important thing to keep in mind when we deal with that. Allow me to invite Dr. Hind Qabawat as well. And Hind is our, again, colleague and friend and a member of the platform, Director of the Interfaith Peace Building at the Center for World Religion and Diplomacy in George Mason, but also I know she's very activist in the Turkish-Syrian border. So the floor is yours.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, KAICIID, for the invitation, and thank you for being among those amazing speakers. I've been inspired so much. Thank you for this great invitation to the Azhar. This is build bridges. Thank you. Okay. Okay. So. I find religion can play an important role in the mediation effort in the Arab world. I find out through my work, understanding religion and partnering with religious actors can be critical to building bridges and mediating conflict on small and large scale. In my country, Syria, religion is present everywhere across society and culture. We're a pluralistic country, Muslim, Sunni, Shiite, Christian, Druze, Yazidi, Alawite, several, and also many, 21 sects. So religion is an essential to the Syrian people. That's why I realized many years ago that religion is so important, and I got involved and still in the interfaith work. And to resolve conflict and to build peace, religion and religious actors need to be included in any aspect of the Arab countries' conflict. There are countless of examples from my experience where religious leaders have made a positive impact in mediation efforts. So it's often religious leaders who have trust within the community, and often that trust can be maintained even in the time of the conflict. But it's not only the religious people and the religious leaders who can act as a third-party mediator to a conflict because of the trust of the community. Today, I would like to speak about a very important role for a woman of faith in our region. Even not trained formally as a religious leader, women are often well positioned to meet within different parties to a conflict because of their religious identities and values. Women now are 50% of the Syrian population. She's active, committed to peace, and they're all working through many organizations who are helping building capacity of Syrian women, displaced refugees in their home of conflict. Helping to develop skills related to conflict resolution and building social cohesion through coexistence, it's a tool to use while solving a conflict. Let me quickly tell you about the crisis in Syria affected one of the local community in the north of Syria, and how many women of interfaith trying to help in the north. Years ago, as you remember, there is a siege near Damascus in the Ghouta. There is thousands of Sunni were under siege, starvation. They've been forced displaced to go to the north. And when they went to the north, to this city called Afrin, where there is the Kurdish community, where Jews and still few living there. Of course, there is tension between the IDP community coming from the south with the Yazidi-Kurdish community. So after lots of grassroots work among the women from all sides, they start meeting, exchanging ideas, brainstorming, and they start solving some problems, initiating some initiative among them. Last month, I had the pleasure to go to Afrin, crossing the Turkish border, and we had an interfaith breakfast where Yazidis women, Sunnis and Christians were gathered to have an interfaith breakfast talking about the future of Syria, about the future of being together. Of course, we had among us amazing, great religious people from all sides. Few challenges we have to mention here. We have to mention the role of spoilers in our work. So when I talk about spoiler, there is spoilers from all sides. The first spoiler in our last work, when we had the woman-to-woman interfaith work in the north, we have a Kurdish Yazidi newspaper. They were attacking us and saying that this is a not credible work and it's not true. But also, we have a traditions leader who came after a few weeks of our meetings to a village close to Afrin, and in his Sunday prayer, he attacked us. He attacked the women of faith, and he attacks our work in the interface. I recall Mr. Meloni yesterday when he said religious people supposed to be wise, authentic, good, and pure, but some of them are not, unfortunately. So we need always to focus on the good one and to get their support and to work with them. Because of them, we can succeed. And also, I need to mention here that we also need their support to have the women present in the international arena, in mediation, and in the local conflict. We can't heal without including the women who are more affected by war and to be present in any mediation process. I have a few humble recommendations, if you allow me. To have more support for the women programs and to be present and to push for her present in active, in the grassroots level, and also in this kind of meetings. My biggest surprise yesterday, and I'm among family and friends, that after listening to these inspiring messages and speeches by our male colleagues, I did see a very modest presence for women. In every meeting in the Arab country, we women fight for our presence. We insist quotas. We fought for quotas to have minimum of 30% presence in every single meetings. Unfortunately, yesterday in Europe, I did see no quotas. Therefore, thank you. Therefore, seeing a room full of men yesterday is not an example the West is giving to our Arab leaders in the Arab society. Number two, I would like also to increase the budget on education for women and youth. Glad that KAICIID has this program of She Dialogue, and also Tenenbaum Center in New York. They have this program targeting women and to increase their capacity. So we need to have more educational programs. Because as you know, education and interfaith education can bring inclusivity and real peace and heal our society. Last and not least, talking about inclusivity. Yesterday, I was very thrilled to see 3 of my Orthodox leaders on the panel in their opening ceremony. I was, as an Orthodox, with 2,000 years of Christianity traditions, proud to be Christian. And the first lesson I learned from my Sunday school as a Christian is inclusivity. And as I mentioned again, inclusivity. I could not hide my surprise again yesterday. Very hard day for me yesterday. To have none of the Muslim religions in the opening ceremony. It's time to heal. This is the name of this conference. I want to end and repeat what His Holiness, my Orthodox leader, said this morning, Bartholomew I of Constantinople, who I adore, who is my role model. He said, let's promote the culture of solidarity. Thank you.
Well, it's easy to summarize what Dr. Hind said. 2 things: inclusivity for women in the religion and policy, and inclusivity of all faith of such event. And clearly she hit a chord because you clap for her twice. And that's an indicator that some of you at least, or many of you, have liked what she offered. More support for women inclusion in policy and mediation. Give example in Afrin, for those of you who sort of a case of Syria in that sense. But I'll leave you with the note that religion made contribution to mediator, and that required trust, and she gave that task to women as well. And in Syria alone, there are 21 sect, as she said, in Lebanon 18. So for those who think in this conference that you can take religion out of the equation, at least in half of the world, you cannot do that. It's an integral component of the life of the people there. And also she mentioned the spoilers as a challenge in as well. So we took you to Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, and as well Iraq, the Najaf, and Iraq as well, the Kurdistan. And we gave you the overall look from Saudi Arabia. That's the tour of this panel, and they all looked at the responses and the different form of responses. If you allow me to take a few comments, and I would appreciate if the comments and the questions are brief and to the point, and we have a number of microphones, and I think this will be a panel to include you. We have about 12 minutes, so we can use them to finish on time. Can you please take the microphone? I think there is some. Anyone? Yes, Sheikh Ismail, تفضل. Again, please, less than a minute.
شكرا جزيلا. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته سادة الحضور وخاصة أخواتنا. I would have spoken in Arabic, but I would speak in English. Though I'm from the United Kingdom, but not for that reason, but for the easiness of everybody's understanding. I think what the sisters referred to just now, and also Dr. Faisal also indicated to that, and we have written, myself, my other colleagues also written to the organizers. And I think it's very important that the topic of this beautiful program was to heal after such a long lockdown, where we're coming together And we saw in the opening ceremony, which was a beautiful ceremony, where we saw that there was no gender balance or neither representation of major religions and faith. So that's been discussed. And my question is that how this is going to be addressed in the future, any future events. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll take a few comments and then we'll ask each of you to respond, not to all of them, to the one that you like to respond to. Yes. They pass him to his fellow. Yes.
Good afternoon. Assalamu alaikum. Dr. Omar Al-Qadri from Dublin, Ireland. I am the chairperson of the Irish Muslim Council. I just want to congratulate KAICIID and acknowledge that you have actually shown how things are supposed to be done, because by looking at the panel, we have not only religious diversity, but also the very much needed gender balance. And I think, you know, what we have seen yesterday, the two observations made by the doctor, I am actually very disappointed personally, because it happened in a European society, which of course, you know, promote both of these diversities and both of the balances. And we did not see it, but thank you for highlighting that. And KAICIID, once again, well done. Thank you. Please keep it up like that.
Thank you. We can take, okay, back. Wasim, no, the lady back there with the young lady, all the way back. We'll come back. Thank you. That way we can do the back of the...
Thank you so much. I'm Zainab from Lebanon. I want just to say a quick comment that this session has really motivated us again as youth to work with religious leaders, because we usually refrain from that, because most of the times our voices are marginalized because we are young. But having to see these speakers being critical and touching on sensitive issues and saying things as is was very encouraging for me, and I haven't seen that in other Western panels. So this is a great evidence that in the Arab world we have great potentials, we have a great enlightenment, and I would really like to thank you, because you really lighted motivation inside me again. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, Muad. And then we'll come to Imam Tarafa.
Thank you so much. I'm Muad Al-Jayfan from Saudi Arabia, and I'd like to thank you for what you present here in this session. I'm just going to make a quick comment and also a question for the panelists about what's been talked about. We've talked about how we should be diverse and how we can include anybody in this regard. So in that term, in that regard, how we can make sure about the young people and the youth who will be participating in making decisions. And I think it's a great effort from IGO and NGOs and government sector to work and to develop this area. But how we make sure that the young people and youth has been their voices heard and also have the part to make decision in this area. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We'll take Imam Tarafa.
We thank Tarafa Bagajati from the platform of Christian and Muslim in Austria, and also MGLC, Muslim Jewish Leadership Council, also supported from KAICIID. But in this time, I would like to speak about as a Syrian origin and not an Austrian issue. And I think it's very important to emphasize that in the public discussion, sometimes the Syrian problem has been so presented as if it is a religious problem or between religion. And it's very important to say that the main problem is actually the dictatorship. The main problem is killing the interfaith and the leadership of the religion. And I think we have to say also a word of solidarity with those people. Thousands of people are in the jail, 100,000, many thousands of refugees, and many of them are religious leaders. I think they deserve our solidarity today. Many thanks.
Thank you. And His Excellency Mustafa Seris, Dr. Mustafa Seris, former Mufti of Bosnia.
Thank you very much. I am very impressed by both men and women, but more by women. Why? And I support those who are complaining why in the West, in Europe here, women were not present about religion. But there is a reason for that. Unfortunately, in the Muslim communities in an Arab country, men made mess about religion. So women must come to clean up. So I would suggest to the women to work on their husbands, to behave rightly in the house, and then when they come to street, to behave as well religiously nice. And now our agenda is Afghanistan. I didn't hear. Arab countries cannot escape from what is going to follow in Afghanistan. So I wish I am a woman, so to be with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mufti. Yes, the lady here, Wasim.
Assalamu alaikum jami'an. I'm Aram from Saudi Arabia, Saudi. I would first like to say that I've never actually seen that before, to be sitting at a table and then label something that's going wrong or something that's being excluded. And beautiful, beautiful people sitting here, they've pointed it out and they made us as women feel witnessed and they made us feel included. And I think that's the very first step in actually opening the dialogue and opening the conversation, because if someone is not gonna speak it out, it's not gonna happen, it's not gonna change. And I've never seen that before. And you're being the voice for all the women, and you're bringing the men to the table, you're bringing the men to the conversation, and that's unbelievably remarkable. And I'd like to thank you personally for that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Is there a question so we can also break the praise a little bit? Yes, Amina.
Amina Bagajati from Austria, working in the education field. And I very much thank you again. And thank you also for highlighting on the importance of education. And I have a question. If we talk about education, we think about educating the small ones. Nevertheless, when we do the programs, we project how we want to see a future generation built. So it has very much to do with ourselves and with the things, the mischiefs, the things we would like to see in a better way done, improving society. So do you have an idea how we can make it that the education issue is not something just for those working in it, but those in society to think about what is the future society we see in vision?
Thank you. Thank you. Allow, okay, let's take one more round, because we'll take two more comments and then we'll stop so we can give our guest to speak. Yes, please.
Thank you very much, and I wanted to follow this young lady's comment. My name is Wolfgang Danspiegruber. I'm the founding director of the Liechtenstein Institute on Self-Determination at Princeton and of the program on religion, diplomacy, and international relations. And I also wanted to wholeheartedly congratulate the organizers for this platform. And I wanted to suggest one question.
Yes, please.
How can we, for those below 25, create a space where they can participate in dialogue without fear and receive all the education they need?
Thank you, Mr. Wolfgang. Well, thank you for attending our session. We'd love to hear of that. And you said all of us who are below 25, and including me and you, right? Yes, please.
Okay, Sandra Karam from Lebanon. Thank you for the inspiring and really motivating speech. Okay, I have one comment and one favor. Just for you, if you can just raise our voice to stop religious leaders supporting politicians, because in the Arab region, we are really suffering from that. And the other question is a little bit similar, how to include youth in making a decision within the interfaith field.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all for your questions. I would like to suggest the following. We have a question of how do we make sure to prevent in the next G20 what happened with the two issues of the inclusion you spoke. Please, one question. The second is how to include youth, which was raised by a number of people, as well as the issue of maybe Afghanistan is a crisis. And what do you think the Arab region response to Afghanistan as was challenged by the Mufti? And the education part, what's suggestion, how to expand education to society? Please select anyone that you think you're comfortable with. I'll give each one of you about 2 minutes to respond, and then we will wrap up. Take a question of what you pick.
I can take, if you want, youth and education and join them together.
Please go ahead.
Okay, it's the same thing, I think, with women. I mean, we always put women and youth, and generally it was men, and putting ad hoc committees for women and youth. Now you're seeing more and more that women are part of the speakers. I think you will have sessions here where youth are also speaking, but we definitely need to add that. So they shouldn't be ad hoc, they should be part of the decision makers. Somebody asked about education and youth. We have programs of educating youth on diversity, educating children on diversity. Before we start the program, we have focus group with kids. So we create the program not only based on what we see, but also on understanding how the children see it and what they need. So they're integrated as themselves, sort of the decision makers, or I mean the think tank also behind. And this is something that we need to get used to integrate. If I can add one thing about Afghanistan, I do not think that the problem is only Afghanistan. I think that the problem is also all the voices that we heard in our countries that were actually happy for Taliban taking over Afghanistan. And this is our problem.
Thank you.
And that we need.
Maybe we can, because we heard from you, we'll start from from Dr. Abdullah and then to His Excellency.
Is this microphone working now?
Yes.
Okay.
Just close it to your mouth.
Okay. Well, for the question of Afghanistan and the Arab world, Afghanistan could be a lesson for the Arab world. There are a lot of lessons that we could learn from the experience of Afghanistan during the last maybe 2 decades. But regarding inclusion of women, youth, etc., I assume it's a matter, again, it's a matter of policy. In this presentation that I gave, it's just was the last point about whether religious leaders were consulted, and that usually applies to other women, youth, etc. There was no evidence that they were really consulted formally to formulate these policies, even though they are stakeholders. Talking about the Arab world, and their role was basically to be supportive of those policies. Now, we focus again in public policy, all the defiance and the negative reactions that came from some religious leaders and other segments of the society towards the public health measures was actually also related to the fact that policies were not well designed to take into account the views of other religious leaders, women, youth, and other segments of society. So how to, that's a $1 million question, how to include. It has been always, the policy making process has been, unfortunately, always exclusive because it's related to other issues, national security, stability, legitimacy, etc. Usually those are grounds to exclude, not to include. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Abdullah. Your Excellency, your response.
أتصور بالنسبة للتعليم، التربية والتعليم هي الأساس في الدول الإسلامية خاصة لبناء إنسان مؤمن بحقوق الإنسان، مؤمن بالتسامح، مؤمن بالتعارف على الأديان، لأن من خلال التربية نستطيع transfer living through education. يعني التربية هي أتصور الأساس لبناء مستقبل مشرق بالنسبة للأجيال مالتنا. لحد الآن في معظم الدول الإسلامية فقط هناك التربية الإسلامية في المدارس. يجب أن هناك تربية تعارف الأديان أو المعلومات على الأديان أو المعارف على الأديان. هذه أتصور هي النقطة الأساسية بالنسبة للتربية. ثانياً، من خلال التربية، من خلال التعليم نستطيع أن نبني مجتمعاتنا بشكل آخر غير المسائل اللي حكينا عنها. ثانياً، بالنسبة لأفغانستان بصراحة يعني نحتاج إلى وقت حتى الأوضاع في أفغانستان كيف يسير، لأن أكو تداخلات وتشابكات، ولكن لحد الآن أنا باعتقادي الوضع في أفغانستان ما يبشر بالخير. فيجب إحنا في الدول الإسلامية نستفيد من هذه المشاكل اللي موجودة في أفغانستان. وطبعا هناك تجارب أخرى في الدول العربية، مثلا في الجزائر، في تونس، في هاي وفي مصر، يعني صارت مشاكل طبيعي. إن شاء الله تكون بخير.
شكرا. أعتقد I think also you were Minister of Education, no? In the Minister of...
يعني كنت 4-5 سنوات Minister of Education in كردستان، وتغيرنا المناهج بصراحة يعني.
Yes, I witnessed that. Yes, the former Minister of Education, and it changed lots of the curriculum, but he called for integration of interreligious dialogue and getting to know each other as part of the curriculum in the Muslim world. Thank you. تفضلي.
I don't have too much to add to my colleagues, but few things. When you talk about education, we need to add critical thinking and civic education, which my colleague here mentioned. It's so important also to change the curriculum, because in the programs, I checked some few of those programs, they need to be more inclusive and thinking about that this society of the Arab country and others is diverse. As Afghanistan, I just here want to take this opportunity to confirm that peace is better than war. All this money spent on war and arms in the Afghanistan, after 20 years, we got to nothing. Now, if those money spent on the Afghanis, on the real education, to start really a good program, we won't be here today. They made money, the Lord of Wars, and we ended here. And I echo my colleague Naila. It is very disappointing when I see few of our colleagues, they're saying congratulations to the Taliban. We shouldn't. We should say congratulations when we see a real democracy and good inclusivity in Afghanistan.
Thank you. سيد جواد خوي، خذنا لنهاية البرنامج.
ما أطول كثير، نصف ساعة فقط.
ولا يهمك.
طبعا دور الشباب في العراق، بما أني من الشباب فدائما منحاز مع الشباب. الله يسلمك شيخة الشباب. فدائما شاركنا الشباب معنا في جميع رحلاتنا، في جميع لقاءاتنا، في جميع نشاطاتنا، حتى لو أن اختلفنا معهم في الأيديولوجية والفكر. ولذلك في صفحات السوشيال ميديا في العراق أتهم أني أروج للإلحاد والعلمانية وما إلى ذلك، لأني أشارك كل الشرائح من الشباب. وبكل تأكيد المستقبل للشباب، ولله الحمد الشباب في منطقتنا، أتكلم في العراق تحديداً، بعيدين كل البعد عن عقد الآباء والمجتمعات السابقة. الشباب يحبون أوطانهم، عندهم قيم الإنسانية والقيم الأخلاقية هي القيم الأولى. بالنسبة إلى التعليم أريد أن أقول لكم تجربة بسيطة. ربما في سوريا أيضا يعانون كما عانينا في العراق. كان هناك منهجا دراسيا ملزما في المدارس في الابتدائية، منهج الوطنية. طبعا منهج الوطنية اسمه جميل لكن محتواه قبيح. الصف الأول ابتدائي دخلت إلى المدرسة وأنا صغيرا، رجعت إلى البيت فرحا، سألني مرحوم والدي قال لي بابا ماذا علموك؟ قلت له أم عربية واحدة ذات رسالة خالدة، وحدة حرية اشتراكية، بالروح بالدم نفديك يا صدام. هذا أول يوم بالصف الأول ابتدائي. يبدو البعثين أكثر ذكاء ودهاء مع الأسف منا. ما زلنا نعاني أيضا في العراق أن نضع منهجاً إنسانياً أخلاقياً يعرف كل الأديان والمذاهب بتعريف مؤدب ومحترم وبسيط. يؤسفني أن أقول أن الإيزيدي لا يميز بالعراق بين السني والشيعي، يقول لا أعرف أيهما يهودي ومسيحي، والشيعي في الجنوب أو السني لا يعرف من هو الإيزيدي. المناهج الدراسية مهمة جدا، نتمنى منهجا محترما في الوطن العربي.
شكرا. شكرا. إذن you saw the last few responses left the crisis and went to the prevention and said education, the long-term investment is the cure for that. Regardless, please join me in thanking our panelists and thank you for your patience as well. Thank you. You asked for youth inclusion, and we do have one more session tomorrow. Dima has the information about it for you to be all invited. This is a promotion for tomorrow.
Thank you, Professor. You're warm. Okay. You're all warmly invited tomorrow to take a look at youth in action, breaking barriers and responding tangibly through projects that contributed to better societies and better change in the Arab region. The session will take place in the same venue here at 11 o'clock. Looking forward.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you.